Hi everyone! So a few weeks ago I did that video talking about my trip to Asia, and thanks so much to everyone who watched that. I had a lot of really great responses from you guys. I know I said I would do like an FAQ if I got a lot of questions that I hadn't answered, so what I did is I went through all the questions and I did read all your comments, and I just picked out questions that were kind of asked over and over again. So the most frequently asked questions that I had in the video was about language. How did I communicate and how did I talk to people? So this really depended on the region. So in sort of the more cosmopolitan areas, like in the major city centers and, you know, places where there's a lot of foreigners anyway, or there's a lot of tourism, it was actually really easy to get by with English, because in those places the locals are more educated, so they might have learned English at school or something, and a lot of the people actually rely on tourists to make their living, you know, if they're taxi drivers or rickshaw drivers, or they sell little trinkets and stuff, so they have to communicate with the tourists that come. It was only when you went to the smaller places and, you know, villages and stuff like that that it became very difficult to talk to people. So sometimes I would have like a phrase book, so it's a little book that you can buy, and it has, you know, sort of the main kind of things like how are you, or I need a room, and it has some little things on like little conversation bits so that you can at least try to talk to the locals. It was also a lot more difficult to speak to the women, because women are obviously not as educated in some of these countries as the men are, so they might, and they also have probably less contact with foreigners. So in that case it was really just a matter of getting by, you know, with body language, using your hands, and, you know, of course you couldn't have like a deep conversation with someone, but, you know, you could make people understand what you wanted by just being very you know, just by using your body language. And, you know, the people there understand that, like, you're trying to communicate with them. And in some places I did pick up like a little bit of the language, like I learned a little bit of Hindi. I don't remember it now though, it's just been too long, but I knew how to say like the basic things just because I was in India for a long time, so I knew how to say like the basic things in Hindi. Okay, so the next most frequently asked question probably was to do with how I carried my money. Like, how did I have enough money to go for that long? Like, how did I carry it around? Was it cash or whatever? So I kind of split up. I had a little bit in cash, so I don't know exactly how much it was, but I had like maybe $500 or something in cash, which is actually a lot of money in Asia. Like $500 in some countries is a huge amount. But most of it that I had was in traveler's checks. So this is kind of like an outdated system here in the Western world. But in Asia, unless you're going to really like major tourist centers, like maybe in Thailand or Bombay and stuff, there really aren't like ATMs on every corner. So you can't just, you know, expect to bring your plastic card. Also, like, credit cards are not really going to get you very far. So I had a lot of traveler's checks, and then you can redeem those for cash. And in most, like in almost every country, there will be places where you can buy more traveler's checks with a credit card. So I would still take a credit, I still had a credit card with me. A credit card is a good way to have also, like, if something like really bad happens, like you're having a medical emergency and you need money, like straight up. I had to once go to like a doctor in Kathmandu. It was a Western doctor. He'd actually studied at like in Calgary, like he got his medical degree in Calgary, and he was pretty much catering only to tourists because he was charging regular prices. You know, he would charge the same price that I would pay for a doctor in Canada. So of course locals couldn't afford him. So yeah, and there I paid like with my credit card. So for things like that, it is handy to have a credit card, and then you can always buy more traveler's checks along the way. And I also had just one of those like carrying bags. You wear them like as a belt underneath your clothes. So I had all my important valuables in there, like my passport and my cash and stuff like that. So I had that on me. Other questions I had is, what did I take with me, and what are the essential things that you should pack? Well, basically I just had one backpack and that's it. I didn't have like an additional purse or anything like that. I wanted to really condense everything down. I didn't take any makeup products. I mean, what's the point? And really, you really have to get good at paring down your stuff. The other thing that you have to remember is if you're going on a longer trip, you will probably be going through different climates. So in the beginning, when I was, for example, in Iran, it was very, very cold. So I had to buy like sweaters and stuff like that because it was just freezing cold. And then when I got to India, I was like, okay, I really don't need this anymore. So I would give it to, like, I would give it away to a local, or, you know, just leave it somewhere. So there are, in most guidebooks, is like an essential packing list of what to take if you're backpacking for a long time, because some things you might not think about, like you should take your own first aid kit. So that has like very, you know, specific things in it that if something happens, that you can just, you know, right away you have something. My dad made a suggestion to take along some special things to fix my backpack. And this is something I would never have thought of, but I think that's a really good trick too, or tip, is that, you know, if your backpack breaks, like what if like one shoulder strap breaks? Like there might not be a store in whatever country you are where you can get that fixed. And I would just wash my clothes along the way. So, you know, underwear and t-shirts and stuff, I didn't take a lot of them. And as you're traveling, you can always buy more things, you know, like if you need a new pair of flip-flops, they'll cost you like $1, not even. Or if you need more t-shirts, like you can buy it along the way. I would take, you know, the essential things, like things that you absolutely want to have. Like, you know, if you really like a certain cut of t-shirt, then maybe take enough that will last you through the trip. Like don't take 10, take maybe like 2 or 3 or something like that. Or I would really recommend to have like one pair of pants that's that you can wash easily and they'll dry easily. So don't take jeans. Most people don't wear jeans when they're traveling because of that reason, because you will probably be washing your own clothes. Okay, so another question that a lot of you asked is, how did my parents or how did my immediate family feel about it? Well, my parents were very supportive, because actually when they were younger, not quite as young as I was when I went on this trip, but when they were in their like 20s, mid-20s, they actually traveled around the whole world as well. And back then it was really kind of like an incredible thing to do, more so than now, because that was like, I don't know, when was that, like it must have been in the 70s or 60s. So they were definitely part of these like hippies that, you know, traveled around the whole world. Having done a trip like this themselves, they knew that, you know, it was an incredible experience. So of course they were very you know, they were always telling me to be cautious, but you know, at that point I was already so independent. Like I was living on my own in Switzerland, so I don't think they were really too worried about me. So in all the big like touristy centers, there is like internet cafes, and I would just keep in touch with everyone through email. I mean, phone calls were very expensive, so I didn't really call that frequently. Sometimes I would call from my hotel and get them to call me back. Another question is, how did I deal with hygiene? And not really sure what this question is asking. I mean, every place that I went, you could take showers. It's not like people don't wash themselves there. I mean, I would shower pretty much every day because you get so grimy, like not only from the sweat but also from the pollution. Some of these cities, like Delhi, is so incredibly polluted that at the end of the day, you know, you'd go like this on your neck and your skin would be like gray, you know, like gray dirt would come off just from the pollution. A lot of the cheaper places, for example in India, like they don't have showers that like come down like this, you know, like the traditional Western showers where you're just standing under. A lot of them, you just get a bucket with water and like a cup, and then you just kind of pour it over yourself. And I mean, that works too. But yeah, I mean, I washed all the time, and I washed my own clothes. Like I bought, you know, laundering soap, and you can buy more along the way. I mean, obviously you're probably not going to be as hygienically clean as you would be at home. But you know, I definitely showered every day, and I had shampoo and soap and all that. The other question I had is about food poisoning. So if it's, you know, if you can prevent food poisoning, or is it something that you just kind of have to deal with? I think to some extent you can prevent it by just trying to eat like fresh or freshly cooked food. So avoiding things like fruits that can't be peeled, so apples and grapes and stuff like that. Things like that, like, I mean, I would still eat fruit, but you would buy fruit like maybe, I don't know, like a pineapple or something that you can take off the skin, or, you know, bananas and things like that that you can peel. And also just eating food that's been cooked and also that hasn't been standing out all day. So sometimes, you know, you go to these like food stands or food markets and they have some stuff and it's been lying there in the heat for maybe 5 hours or, you know, a couple hours, so all the bacteria has, you know, like sometimes the refrigeration is very poor in these countries. So you just have to kind of be aware of that and just order like cooked, freshly cooked food. But I think it's inevitable that at some point you will get food poisoning, you know. I mean, obviously you don't drink the water, like I didn't drink the tap water and stuff. You always have to buy like water, bottled water, but it's really cheap. Like, you know, that is not the issue, but it's just, you know, at some point you will probably get food poisoning. It's just how it is. We don't have all these toxins, I guess, that people there are more used to, and they've grown up with it, so their bodies are kind of more resistant than ours. Like our bodies are much less resistant than people who grew up in these countries. So the other question that was kind of related with that was, how did you deal with the food in Asia? Because it's, first of all, the spiciness, because as Westerners we might not have been used to it. So well, personally I love Asian food. So for me, I absolutely loved going to Asia and eating there because I love Asian food. I love Thai food and Indian food and stuff. I mean, yes, sometimes it was incredibly spicy because, I mean, I like spicy food. I eat probably spicier than all my friends. But for people from Asia, their level of spicy food is just beyond what we're used to. So sometimes there would be some things that were just so hot, like my throat was like on fire, you know, trying to eat it. So you just have to, if you're going to a restaurant and, you know, if you're ordering something, just ask them if it's a spicy dish and ask them to make it mild. Like, not every dish in Asia is spicy. Like, there's a lot of curries, for example, in India that are very mild and just have a lot of these different aromatic spices. Or like in the south, there's a lot of stuff with like coconut curries, and they're kind of more mild as well. So you kind of like learn over time what to order and what you think you'll be able to eat. I would never want to travel to a country and then only eat Western food. Like, then I might as well just stay home, you know? Okay, so another question is, did I get any vaccinations done before the trip, and how did I deal with malaria? So I did get vaccinations. I don't remember exactly which ones they were. I think I did get a tetanus booster shot, and I got one of the hepatitis ones. I think it was hepatitis A, or I don't know. I don't remember exactly which ones. It was a while ago. But if you are planning to go on a trip to like one of these kind of tropical countries, you should definitely go to your doctor before. And actually, depending on where you live, there'll be a tropical institute where it's where you can get vaccinations, especially for these specific diseases that we don't have here in Western countries. So they will recommend you, depending on where you go, what you need, because not every region of the world has the same risks. And they'll also be very up to date on outbreaks. So if there's been like an outbreak in a country, like they can tell you that because they're very up to date with those things. And malaria, I took the prophylactic, there's some pills that you can take. I don't remember what it was actually called, but what I did is I bought like one package here in Switzerland because they're really, really expensive here, because it's a very specific, you know, drug that we don't use here because we don't have malaria here. And then when I got to Asia, I bought some more there because there it's really cheap, right? But then actually I kind of stopped taking them at some point because there's a lot of side effects from it, and there's actually, you can take some pills actually if you get it, that kind of stops it. So that's what I did. I know it's kind of a risk, but you know, I always protected myself with like the bug spray and stuff. I just didn't want to be taking malaria pills for like a year. Okay, so another question is, how did I find the hotels that I stayed at? So I basically just went to a place, and sometimes my guidebook would have like recommended hostels or hotels and stuff in there. But actually, often if you go to a place, you can just walk around and look, because everything is written like hostel or backpacker and stuff. Sometimes they're called touts, and they come up to you and they're like, oh, come stay at this hotel. But you have to be a bit careful about that, because sometimes they will actually be working for the hotel, in which case it's fine. But in other cases, they don't work for the hotel, but they bring you there, and if you stay there, they get a commission, which gets placed on your bill basically, but you don't know it. So that's something that you have to be a bit careful about. But yeah, often we would just walk around and like, you know, we'd go into all the hotels and check out the rooms, if it's clean, if it's safe and stuff, and see how much it costs, and then you kind of negotiate a price. Bargaining is definitely like, everything there is, you can bargain for everything. None of the prices there are fixed. It's pretty much like you pay what you can bargain for. So often they'll start with a really high price, and if you just say okay, well, they're like, oh yeah, great, you know, we just charged this guy 3 times as much as what we would normally charge. Another question, this is really particular I guess to women, is how do you deal with your period? I would just recommend to take with you as much as you can tampons and stuff like that if you use tampons, because in some places it's really hard to find. If you go to like any of the major cities, you can maybe find it in like the bigger pharmacies, but if you're anywhere outside, it's going to be really hard for you to find any of these products. I really don't know how local women deal with it. I guess they have like, you know, sort of like cotton reusable rags or something that they use. I have no idea. For most Western women, that's not an option for us. We don't really use, I mean, I know some people do, but for most Western women, that idea is just disgusts us. So I would try to take as many tampons and stuff as you can, and then if you are running low and you're in a big city, try and find something like a big pharmacy. It's annoying. I mean, it's just something that we have to deal with. But yeah, also if you're on the pill or something like that and you want to keep taking it throughout the time, make sure you take that all with you, because you might have problems finding that exact medication or whatever you need along the way. Another thing that people were curious about is what are some of the bad experiences that I had. I mean, I had so many bad things happen to me. I could tell you a lot probably, but you know, it's just, you get used to it. I mean, in a way, you start to kind of like zone out on those things. You know, I stayed at hotels where there was cockroaches in my bed, or not in the bed, but there was cockroaches like everywhere. I stayed at a hotel in Delhi that had a gap under the door that was like about this big, and rats about this big, seriously, like this big, with tails like this long, were scurrying around the room as soon as I turned off the light. So I slept with the light on all night because they don't come into places with bright light. So rats were very common, especially in India. It's like, often the doors are not, you know, like here when we close a door, it's tight and it's sealed and stuff, and there often it's not like that, especially in like the less expensive places. There'll be like cracks in the doors, especially like on the bottom and stuff, so animals come in. And I remember when I was traveling with those two other Swiss girls, and we were staying at a hotel, and I guess rats came in because we had food, like fruit or something in our room, but it wasn't like on the floor. We'd hung it up on this hook, and we just heard this kind of, you know, this kind of noise. So I flipped on the light, and there was like a rat trying to jump up like the wall trying to get at the fruit. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I mean, it's gross at the time, but like looking back on it now, it's kind of funny. The other thing is that the insects there are a lot bigger. So if you see a spider here and it's like, you know, a spider this size, and there as India I saw spiders like this big, you know, or I saw just weird insects that we don't have here, and so that was it's kind of hard getting used to that. I never really got used to it, but it's just kind of, you have to learn how to deal with it. I think probably the worst things that happened was the groping and like all the attention from men. That was just really it was just annoying, because it was something you always had to be prepared for. And it's hard, like, I mean, when you get groped, it's the easiest thing to do is to try to get yourself out of that situation. So, I mean, it would happen like sometimes in broad daylight. Like, I'd just be walking down the street with people everywhere, and some guy, you know, like just as he's passing me, like grabs me somewhere, and it's just, what are you gonna do? Like, there's nothing you can really do. But the worst times were when you were in a situation where you were kind of trapped. Like, I mean, one time I was taking the train somewhere, and some guy was like touching my leg or something, but I couldn't even see who it was because it was like dark. So in those kind of situations, like what I did is, what I found actually worked for me was to make like a scene. I mean, not in a way that I'd be screaming around or something like that, but I would just be like, I would say loudly like, oh, stop touching me or something like that. And that would usually embarrass the man who did that, even though sometimes I didn't even know who it was. It would embarrass that person, and then it would stop. But it's just, yeah, it's hard. I mean, there's not really anything you can do in these countries, and I feel like bad for the women who have to live in those countries like all the time and have to deal with that like all the time, because I couldn't imagine living in a country where every day that I go outside, like some gross old man would like grab me, and it's just, ugh, I don't know. Like that was probably the hardest thing to deal with. I mean, I was never like threatened, like I never felt like, oh my god, I'm gonna be raped or something. It was more kind of like groping and things like that, but it's something that definitely like grates on you over time, because it happens so frequently and you do feel violated, and you know, you can't, it's just often you can't really do anything, because in that situation it happens sometimes so fast and you don't even know who that person was, and then it's like that person's probably already moved on or whatever, you know. Dressing conservatively I think probably helps, but I think in some of these countries, like, these men just have no respect for you especially as a woman traveling by yourself. They have no respect for you. So they think that they can just do anything, and I think that says a lot about how their society values women. You know, these women in these countries probably don't have a very high standing, so they don't care, you know, and that's, I know, it's just, yeah, that really depended also from country to country, like I said. In the Buddhist countries, it is very different. So in the Buddhist countries, I had that almost never. So I think that has a lot to do with it as well, like the religion and just the cultural aspect and stuff like that. Another question I had quite frequently is, how did it feel when I went back home? Did I change my own way of viewing my culture, and did I experience a cultural shock? Yes, to some extent. It's definitely, like, I really was ready to go home at that point, like after a year. Like, that's a really long time to be in a completely different culture, and at some point you might experience, especially if you travel by yourself and you have to go through all these like hardships and stuff, you have to do everything yourself, is you get tired of it. You just want to go home. You want to be back where you know everything works, and you know, you like just all these little things, like you want the train to be on time, you want the bus to be on time, you don't want to have to stay at dive hotels anymore, you don't want to get groped anymore, you know, you don't want to get food poisoning anymore, you're just sick of it at some point. I mean, at least I was like really ready to go home. I was like, yes, I've had an amazing experience, but at some point it's like, okay, I've had enough. It definitely was weird coming back. It was kind of like a cultural shock. Everything was so clean, and you know, everything was working, everything was functioning. You know, the infrastructure was so perfect, and all these kinds of, you know, things that we definitely take for granted. It did change the way that I see our culture, because I realized that I shouldn't, you know, take all those things for granted that we have, like, you know, the way that our daily life functions with such ease. All these kinds of things that we just take for granted in the Western world, especially as women, it definitely awakened a new gratitude for those things. I also realized like how much excess we live in, and I think, you know, it's kind of hard to, like, yes, it has changed me, but on the other hand, it's like I don't want to live like a pauper now, you know. I live in part of this society that has all these luxuries, and I'm extremely blessed with that. I'm extremely blessed to have all these opportunities and all these things that people in other countries might not have, but at the same time I don't want to give up on them, you know. Like, I know that we live in a Western world, we live with so much excess, like we have so much of everything, you know. If I want new clothes, I can go shopping. If I want a new phone, I can buy it. If I want, you know, anything, well, you know, anything within my own means, I can do that. You know, I can go get an education. I think we're so materialistic, we always want more, and we want better things, and we want more and more, but at the same time, it's like now I'm living here again, and I know I'm like part of that cycle again. But it definitely is something that is in the back of my mind. It's like, I know I could live without that, because I lived without that for a year, and I know that millions and millions of people all over the world live without that every day for their whole life. So it definitely has given me a different perspective on all these luxuries and all these things that we enjoy in our, you know, Western societies. Especially, it makes me so happy that I was born a woman in a Western society, because all the rights that I have, like, I know it's not perfect. I know that women still, you know, earn less than men in the same job, and we have all these things that, you know, we can still work on, but I'm so happy that I can vote and I'm taken seriously. Like, I can get an education. You know, I can go into pretty much any profession that I want, and those things, I think, as a woman, I definitely do not take for granted anymore, because I saw firsthand how women in tons of other countries, or in many countries, don't have those opportunities and don't have those rights. It definitely has changed how I look at things. Another question that I had is, what are some other places that I would like to visit? Well, I personally would love to go back to Asia, because there's still countries that I didn't go see. I would love to go to Indonesia and Vietnam and Malaysia, maybe even China. Definitely want to go see Japan. So those are all things that I would still like to go see in Asia. But there's also like other parts of the world that I would like to see. Like, I'd love to, I don't know, go to Africa or something. Even like Northern Africa, like to Morocco is another big dream of mine. But I think currently, with all the unrest that's happening in the Maghreb region and like Middle East, I think now is not really the best time to go. Maybe when things, you know, calm down a bit more. It's hard now, because it's harder when you have a job and you have responsibilities and you have monthly bills that you need to pay. And actually, I have two friends who I think he is, I don't know how old he is. He's like 28, and his girlfriend is like a few years younger, and they quit their jobs. So they had, like, you know, steady incomes. They quit their jobs and they got rid of their apartment, so and all their furniture and everything. Like, they just got rid of everything, and they saved up all this money, and they're gonna go traveling now for as long as they can with the money that's saved up. And I have such respect for people who do that, because I know it's really hard to give up on that once your life has become stable, and, you know, you have the security of a regular job, and you have a nice car, and you have, you know, decorated your apartment all nice and stuff. And to give that all up and say, okay, I'm gonna go traveling now to have this experience, because I may not be able to do it, you know, in a few years from now. That takes a lot of guts, and I'm so happy for them that they're gonna do that. So anyway, that's pretty much all the major questions that you guys had. So thanks so much for watching this video, and hope that answered some more of your questions and curiosities, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.